Inspired by Steven Spielberg's childhood, The Fabelmans tells the story of a little boy living in Arizona in the 1950s through 60s who discovers his passion for cinema. For this personal project, Spielberg chose to shoot on 35mm film with a Panaflex Millennium. However, some sequences were shot in 16mm on the Arriflex 16, which is a camera from the 60s. These technical choices and the work of legendary DP Janusz Kaminski give The Fabelmans a very specific look, which in the end is very stylized, with a strong dominant blue in the shadows and yellow in the highlights, which is an interesting cold-warm contrast. And as we always say, it's the work in camera that really drives toward the final look, but we can still look to emulate the style in post with the grade, so let's do that. As always, we grabbed a shot from Artlist Max, which is this one here, and it's the atmosphere in this that's going to help us a lot in driving that look of The Fabelmans. And this clip was shot on Red and recorded in RAW, so in DaVinci Resolve, we'll be using the Camera Raw tool for development. The advantage of RAW is that all the data received by the sensor is recorded and can be manipulated afterwards. For example, the value of ISO. This clip was shot on ISO 800 when shooting, but we can increase it to 1280, and this is not an artificial ISO increase. Color space and gamma curve are correctly set here, and we can adjust the white balance directly. Around 4200 seems fine, and we'll increase the saturation just a little bit to about 15%. Now we will start to place our nodes. The first will be for the primary corrections. To create a film look, we'll be using DaVinci Resolve's Film Look LUT, since this LUT is designed to work on a gamma curve in Cineon. So we'll put a node for the conversion to Cineon, and then a node for the LUT. And we're going to see that in more detail in a minute. The Fabelmans has an overall yellow-green hue, so on our primary correction node, we will use the white balance to warm up our image just like that. On the next node, apply a color space transform effect and choose Cineon Film Log as output gamma. Now apply a LUT from DaVinci's Film Look folder. The D55, D60, and D65 refer to the color temperature of the LUT, D55 for 5500 Kelvin, D65 for 6500 Kelvin, and so on. So D55 will be warmer than D65. Here, the Kodak 2383 D55 LUT fits perfectly and does not alter the skin tone, so we'll go with that. Now we're going to intensify the blue cast by creating a new node, then use the HDR color wheels to push the low light wheel into the blue and the highlights slightly into the yellow. Then, with the color warper in Chroma Luma mode, set the axis to -35 and move the bottom points of the grid to the left. These points correspond to the darkest areas, and moving them to the left increase their saturation. We want to avoid it being too intense in the highlight, so limit the effect to that level. On a new node, increase the yellow on the highlights, still with the HDR color wheels, and proceed in the same way. If we look at more shots from the Fabelmans, the skin tones are generally yellow-orange with very slightly pinkish and relatively dark. So place a new node here, and with a power window, isolate the actor's face, then start tracking to stick this window to them throughout the shot. Now, with the color warper tool, move the points corresponding to the skin tones, like adding a little pink in the cheeks here, for example. It's looking pretty good now, but there is still an issue. The subject is underlit compared to the background, and we need them to stand out more than the background. To correct this, we're going to use a new tool in DaVinci Resolve 18, the Magic Mask. One thing to note here is if we use the Magic Mask on a serial node, we need to restart the tracking each time we make a change on a previous node, which is problematic because tracking can take time. So the trick is to apply the Magic Mask to a node placed at the beginning of our node tree parallel to our current nodes. Then place two parallel nodes to make the corrections on the foreground and on the background. And then we will link the mask of the Magic Mask to these nodes. We'll then link the entry point to my Magic Mask node. Then remove the link from the skin node to link it to the parallel mixer, like this. And finally, link the parallel mixer to the output point. With that done, let's go back to our Magic Mask node. With the Magic Mask object tool, draw a line following the character's shape and enable the mask overlay to get a preview of the masking, then launch the tracking. We'll also make some adjustments to soften the mask. Now still on the same node, place a gradient power window, just like that. Now go to the front node, and in the key tab, reverse the mask. Then use the RGB curve to slightly increase the character's exposure. And on the back node, do the opposite. Reduce the exposure of the background like this, and then we can see our before and after. Next, we're going to apply some effects to our final look, and on our new node, after the parallel mixer, apply the texture pop effect. This will give relief to the image by artificially boosting the sharpness of the image, and something just like that should be enough. In the Fabelmans, you'll notice that the light sources are surrounded by a strong halo. This can be caused by using a filter on the lens, like a Pro Mist filter, having haze in the room, but it's also accentuated by shooting on film. And we can recreate this with the glow effect. So add that here and adjust the settings so that the effect is present only in the bright areas like this, then toss it in either add or screen mode depending on taste. Then we will use our last node for vignetting. It should be slightly present at the top of the image, so switch to advanced mode, then border shape triangle, and increase softness and transparency, and change composite type to overlay. And there you go. Then we have this second shot here, which we also got from Artlist Max. And if you don't know what that is, check out our latest episode where we create a rip reel, and I use Artlist for the entire thing. You have sound effects, royalty-free music, stock footage, templates, plugins, software. They've taken everything that they have, which is all awesome, and put it into one spot with one subscription with different levels of subscription depending on what you need. But the music is what you've been hearing this entire episode as well. It's an excellently curated bit of music with everything from cinematic music to more needle drop style music, and a great way to search for all that too. And as you've seen from the two clips we've shown here, really cinematic stock footage that you can use for any of your needs as well. And I did already talk about the rip reel episode, but in that episode, I use all their footage to create a rip reel, which is something you use to pitch a possible feature film. So all the footage needs to be incredibly cinematic, and that is what they have here. But you also have access to a vast catalog of sound effects for pretty much everything you would need, and again, great search functions to help you dial down and find exactly what you're looking for. Then you have all of these great templates for different style projects, and the one that we did, we used it just for a title, but you can do everything out to a full promo and drill down to what software you are using. Then of course you have the plugins with some great options here, and 2 bits of great software with Emerge, which is their photo editing software, and HitFilm, their video editing software, and compositing. So you have everything under one umbrella, again with one subscription. So definitely check out the notes below and use our link to get 2 months free off of an annual subscription. Logo. But this shot that we're using here was recorded in RAW as well, so we'll use Camera Raw to develop the clip and have a natural, usable working base. We'll dedicate our first node to primary corrections. We'll give it a green cast to the image, reduce the tint to around -60, then with the lift wheel, warm up the shadows, and with the gain wheel, cool the highlights. Now, with the color warper tool, we'll move the center point toward the blue-green tones, just like that. Like in the previous example, we're going to be using the film look LUT, so in the same way, create a new node, apply a color space transform effect with the Cineon film log as output gamma, then create another node and apply the Kodak 2383 D55 LUT. On a new node, we're going to warm up the image slightly, about 100 in temperature, and with the RGB curves, we'll adjust our exposure and contrast just like this. Now we'll want to adjust the skin tones and increase the blue cast in the low lights, so create 2 new parallel nodes. We'll use the first of the 2 nodes to correct the skin tone, still with the color warper tool, moving the corresponding points to have a more natural skin tone. You'll want to pay special attention to that since skin tones are paramount in any grading work. We'll also reduce the luminance of these 3 points to slightly darken the tint. Of course, we can isolate skin tones with the qualifier tool or a power window, but that's not necessary here. Now on the node below, we'll use the color warper in chroma luma mode to increase the blue in the lowlights. So set the axis to about -30 and move the points just like that. Then lower this one a bit in order to darken some areas. To finalize our look, apply the texture pop effect, then subtly adjust the settings to have something very light, just like that. And finally, for the natural film look, apply grain on the last node. We chose the 35mm 400T preset to have a realistic and relatively fine grain. And that's it. As always, links to everything in the notes below, and we do these episodes with our good friend and colorist Benjamin Lambinet. He has some amazing LUTs of his own that he sells, so definitely check the notes below for his social accounts and his LUTs. But that's it for today, and until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.